As I said, Henry Mills was my favorite character in the book. He always knew the right path.
Well, if Henry was looking for an adventure, getting captured by the Candy Killer is one way to go. Let's break down Season 7, Episode 16 of Once Upon a Time right here on What Happened. What's going on, Oncers? Lisa here, and thanks so much for being patient with me on this recap for this episode. So I was out of town the weekend that this episode aired, and I only just now got to catch up. So for those of you who have been patient with me, I give you a high five, and hey, if you like these recaps, you get 2 recaps this week for Once Upon a Time. But this episode did confirm the theories that I talked about last week's episode about Nick being Hansel, which I think a lot of you also kind of figured out as well. I think it's an interesting way to go, seeing as how this Nick guy was played up to be Jack from Jack and the Beanstalk. We now know that he liked to use different names. He actually came off very nice, so it's going to be interesting to see just what happens with him and how he took this dark turn. I'm also still very bummed that Gisela is gone, but we do have this Margo and Tilly relationship blossoming, so I guess that will kind of fill the void. So let's go ahead and break down this episode real quick. In the Enchanted Forest storyline, we have Henry seeking out some kind of adventure. Being in love with Cinderella has made him kind of feel inadequate in ways. He's determined to find a great adventure and have a great story because he feels like that's what he needs to be happy and make everyone else happy, and that's what she deserves. He's especially on the hunt for a ring with a story to use to propose to Ella. When his slay a dragon plan falls through, Hook helps him out, which ends up being a mission to sneak onto the Jolly Roger, take the ship back from Blackbeard, and find Davy Jones's locker of treasure. The adventure is in full swing, and the duo land aboard the Jolly Roger to find out that only Smee is their loyal ally. And then they get busted by Blackbeard, who uses the map to find the treasure and plans to kill Hook and Henry after they find it. They get the treasure, and Hook manages to untie his binds, and he and Henry and Smee go to battle against Blackbeard and his men. Henry gets the best of Blackbeard and demands Blackbeard give him the special ring from the treasure when Blackbeard mentions a bride, and Henry's like, "Hold up, wait a minute. How did you know that this ring was for a bride? Never mentioned a bride." And it's like, wah, wah. Yeah, busted. It turns out Hook set this whole thing up for Henry, and Henry is pissed. Well, the real adventure does end up coming their way in the form of a terrible storm that doesn't look like they'll get out of alive. Henry realizes this whirlpool is caused by magic, which means Davy Jones wants his treasure back. So Henry tells Hook to get him close to the middle of the whirlpool, and Henry throws the spring in and saves the day. Yep, he did get the adventure he asked for, but he's also humbled as he realizes he doesn't need a great story or adventure. He just wants a great life, and that's going to be enough for him. He then takes Ella to a lake where nothing epic has happened. It's a very simple, boring lake, and he proposes to Ella, and yeah, she says yes right away, even with a simple ring that he gives her. In Hyperion Heights, Henry is also trying to find his great adventure and how he fits into the story. It seems like he started to lose faith and hope in himself, which is very un-Henry Mills-like, but thankfully Rumple's there to kind of rejuvenate Henry into believing in himself. But before getting to that whole storyline, let's talk about Tilly and Margo. It seems like Tilly has eaten Rogers out of house and home, and he's gotten her a job thanks to a good friend of his. Tilly will be working with Sabine on the Rollin' Bayou food truck on the odd days since Drew works the even days. This finally gives us that Sabine and Rogers moment together, and their chemistry is right there, and there's flirting and everything. I mean, she calls him her favorite detective, and his smile, and it just makes me want these two together. And I want to know why it's taken this long. We're on episode, 16? I feel like they started flirting in episode 4, and then they just forgot about it. So we'll see if this actually turns into anything. Anyway, Tilly is nervous about starting her job, and it turns out she's not too good at making beignets, so Sabine sends her out front to help with sales. Tilly decides to pass out free samples, and when she's down to her last one, she goes to offer it to someone sitting on the bench, who turns around and ends up being Margo. Now, earlier in the episode, Margo got into a fight with Zelena. Zelena was helping Lucy work on this potion to cure Henry, but they're sitting there waiting for Regina to find the last ingredient. When Margo sees Zelena saying bye to Lucy, she kind of feels a little jealous, and she inquires who that is and what's up, and the fact that Zelena can't really tell Margo the truth. It causes Margo to think that she made a mistake coming home and that her mom hasn't changed at all. And you really kind of feel for Zelena because you know she's right there wanting to tell Margo everything. It's on the tip of her tongue, but she knows that for the protection of Margo and everybody, she can't say anything. Their fight has Margo upset, which is why she's sitting on the bench. Tilly's surprised Margo even remembered her name and thanks Margo for saving her life and giving her good advice. The roles are then reversed, and Margo opens up about her mom problems, and Tilly is the one with the good advice, saying that she bets it hurts Zelena more to keep the truth from Margo than it hurts Margo. And as if you needed another sign that these two were destined to be together, the last free sample was the one beignet that Tilly made in the shape of a heart. Like a real human heart, not this kind of heart. You know what? Margo loved it it, and they took it as some kind of a sign. Now when Rogers comes to pick Tilly up after her shift, Sabine gives Tilly praise, and Tilly's so happy she has a job where she gets paid to do something she likes, which is something we all really should strive for if it's possible. People actually know Tilly's name now, she can talk to them, and she also says she met someone really special named Margo who saw her for who she really is. Margo also returns to Ronnie's and makes up with Zelina. When it comes to Henry, he's looking for Ronnie, but she's MIA, so instead he meets Margo. When he goes to leave the bar, he sees Nick sulking in the corner and goes to talk to him. Now Nick says he tried to land an important client last night, but she got away, which is of course a reference to the fact that Drizella got away from his attack and ran out of town, or basically ran out of the realm. Nick then gives this mumbo-jumbo talk about signs, and Henry gets a call about his podcast, which ends up being a job offer to produce other people's podcasts in New York. He has an interview in New York the next day and decides to share this news with Jacinda, and of course neither of them act like this decision affects them and they're happy about it, but it's obvious that Henry wanted Jacinda to tell him not to go and that Jacinda wanted to tell Henry not to go, but she didn't want to hinder him from his dream. All this kind of stuff, all that back and forth still is happening. When Henry is packing, he finds a piece of the glass slipper and hears a knock on the door, and he thinks that it will be Jacinda, but it's just good old Rumple who needs his help with the candy killer case. They head to the evidence room where Rumple hands over what he found at the crime scene where Drizella was attacked. It's a copy of Henry's book with tons of notes in it. It seems like the killer is a big fan of Henry's, and Henry may have the secret to figure out who the killer is. Henry starts looking through the book and he's kind of lost hope and is upset that his stories would cause someone to kill. He's ready to just pack up and leave this town behind when Rumple steps in, telling him that he's read the book and Henry Mills is his favorite character and why Henry's his favorite character and all of this stuff. Henry's not really buying it at first until he explains to Rumple that he wrote himself into this book to connect with the stories, and then he realizes that the killer must be doing the same thing. They think that they're a character in this book. Henry realizes that the chapter of Hansel and Gretel is the only one with corrections to the actual story and little clues written down that say no happily ever after, remember Gretel, and ovens make the deepest burns, and the word twins is underlined. They realize the killer thinks he's Hansel and is avenging his sister's death. Now the parallel to the fairy tale storyline comes when Rogers tells Henry that he'll have one hell of a story to tell if they catch the killer. Henry then heads off to go to the airport and thinks about calling Jacinda but doesn't. He then gets a flat tire and ends up under the troll bridge. He sees that a piece of the glass slipper is what has caused his flat tire. Now all of a sudden Nick pulls up and offers to help Henry out. Henry thinks this glass slipper is a sign, and he tells Nick that he no longer is going to New York and needs to find Jacinda to tell her the truth. Meanwhile, Nick seems to be dropping hints, but Henry doesn't pick up on them. Henry then can't keep his trap closed and spills everything in the car about the day's events with Rumple and Rogers, about the case, and what they found out about this candy killer. Nick starts to tense up, and when he goes to grab his keys, Henry catches a glimpse of the scars on Nick's arms, finally puts two to two together, and decides to pretend like he wants to go back to the airport. When Henry tries to get himself out of the car, Nick drugs him, and when Henry comes to, he's tied up in Nick's apartment, and he sees all the scars on Nick's arms because Nick's wearing himself a tank top now. By this time, Lucy has encouraged Jacinda to call Henry and get together and how she was wrong about keeping them apart. Nick ignores Jacinda's call to Henry and tells Henry he doesn't want to turn himself in because then he'll have to stop killing, and it's like he's not done with that yet, obviously. He then grabs the candy box he's prepared off his table. So who is the recipient of the next candy box? Well, when Margo and Zelina are talking and making up at Ronnie's, Zelina mentions that Margo's right and she does miss her fiance. Margo then pulls out the heart-shaped box of chocolate she says was waiting on the doorstep for Zelina and must be from Zelina's fiance, but Zelina knows better. Looks like she's the candy killer, Hansel's next target. And well, that wraps up the main events of this episode. Now I thought the Enchanted Forest Realm whatever storyline for this episode was actually quite a snooze fest. Like, I love Hook, but Henry sometimes just not my favorite. I liked Henry more as a little kid, kind of. But yeah, one of the most boring Enchanted Forest storylines for me this season. Now the Candy Killer storyline, though, I think is just now starting to get good, and I like it. I love to see the Realm storyline for younger Hansel and Gretel and how this whole thing started, so hopefully they show that soon. And I do think Nathan Parsons is doing such a great job coming off charming and like innocent, but also he has this bit of creepy look in him, so it's a nice balance there. Also, I love Tilly and Rogers, the progression of their relationship and how proud he was of her for getting a job, how proud she was of herself, and how much she loved that he believed in her. And yeah, I'm just hoping they find out that who they really are very, very soon. Like, if I had to watch a spinoff of any of the new characters, it'd be Rogers, Tilly, and Margo, or maybe a Drizella spinoff. Let's take a look at the promo for the next episode.
Person who hurt me the most. You're familiar with her brand of wicked. You're gonna help me make her pay for what she did.
I'm next on the Candy Killer's hit list.
So you two have history?
That witch is the one that got me into this mess. It's time you learned a lesson. I'm tired of paying for her sins.
If you ever want to see your precious Boo Bear again, you will do exactly what I say.
Alright, looks like some of the backstory of Hansel and Gretel may come into play, or at least Zelina's history with the witch responsible for trying to cook the twins. Now, Nick's first 2 targets didn't really give him much of a challenge, so I don't know if he knows what he's up against when it comes to Zelina, but that's going to be a tough fight. And we just have to wait and see how he's going to use Henry in this plan. I also think it sucks because now everyone thinks that Henry's in New York, so no one's going to be looking for this guy. So actually, it's a really smart plan on Nick's part. Now I want to hear your thoughts on this episode. Did you figure out that Nick was Hansel last episode like I did, or did it come as kind of a surprise to you in this episode? What do you think his master plan is, and how will Henry get out of this sticky situation? Do you ship Sabine and Rogers, and what do you think of the whole Margot-Tilly relationship? Sound off in the comments down below, then click right over here to see some of my latest interviews, including the cast of The Miracle Season, which is a great movie that Tiara Scobie, who plays Robin or Margot, is also in, or my interview with the cast of Truth or Dare. Be sure to subscribe if you like what you see, hit the thumbs up. My name's Lisa, and I'll see you back here Friday for the next episode recap of Once Upon a Time.